All righty. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this week's edition of Roundabout Sports, presented by Interstate 70 Sports Media, where our passion is our profession. Thank you so much for tuning in. It's a very odd, warm January 31st, 2024. Thank you so much for tuning in. I'm the Maestro, Jeremy Carpa, alongside everyone's favorite co-host around here, Jared Shannon. Jared, how you doing, buddy?
I'm doing wonderful. It's a wonderful day out in this beautiful Midwest city, but I'm surviving, so it's going to be a good day.
Oh, absolutely. And I say everybody's favorite co-host because you are one half of the talented duo at Issues with Wrestling with Christopher Miles. And I know we'll be talking a little bit later on about what's to come tomorrow night on the newest episode of Issues with Wrestling. But until then, I know you're a little frustrated. First off, folks, be sure to find us on Spotify, on Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts. I mean, be sure to subscribe and follow us on Facebook, on Twitter, and subscribe to us on the Interstate 70 Sports Media YouTube channel. Um, I know you're a little frustrated given the results of the Ravens Chiefs AFC Championship game. Whereas I'm pretty darn satisfied with it. I know you are very much not so.
Yeah, I'll give the Chiefs credit. They did a lot better than I would have expected. I would have thought they would have lost to the Ravens compared to the seasons the Ravens have had. It's just amazing, and I think it's just a bummer to see them go out this way, but you have to learn, and congratulations to the Chiefs for moving forward once again.
Well, and speaking of Christopher Miles, thank you so much for tuning in. He sends us a comment for those listening to the audio version. We always post the comments that people send to us on the live broadcast, wishing us a good evening. So, if anybody didn't believe it before, I think it goes without saying that the Chiefs have officially solidified the fact that they are the modern dynasty in the NFL. I mean, the Chiefs went to M&T Bank Stadium in Baltimore, where they took on the number one seeded Baltimore Ravens. They were 13-4 in the regular season, and you know the Chiefs came off a win against the Buffalo Bills, which also was a close call, but Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs, in what was Mahomes' first true road game, he goes down there, he beats Buffalo. Then they head to Baltimore, and I mean, Christopher Miles says, "Can't we just have both teams lose?" Unfortunately, that's not how it works in the playoffs. Doesn't how it work anywhere, honestly. But nevertheless, the Chiefs took a 17-7 halftime lead. They held on late to return to their fourth Super Bowl in 5 seasons. And, Travis Kelce had a historic playoff game. It led to him setting multiple new records. He had an 11 catch, 116 yard, and one touchdown performance. And with that, Travis Kelce surpassed arguably the greatest wide receiver of all time, Jerry Rice, to set the NFL record for postseason receptions with 152, which I mean, it just adds to the Hall of Fame resume that Travis Kelce already has. Um, and we look, Jared, at the offense, which has been very questionable this season, but once again, Mahomes and Travis Kelce showed why this Chiefs team is still so dangerous.
You know, I give the Chiefs a lot of hate, and I give Patrick Mahomes a lot of hate, and the management a lot of hate. But what I will say about the Chiefs is when it comes to those big games, there's something that switches in that locker room where they all kind of say, hey, we got to get this together. We got to figure out where that struggle point is and just fix that, remove it, practice it more. And you saw how they put all their heads together and they took the ball home.
And on top of that, we talk about the offense. Well, then you go over to the defense, and the defense to me is what's been saving the Kansas City Chiefs a lot this season. The Chiefs go in facing arguably the guy that's going to win the MVP this year, and I feel it's deservedly so. Now, look, for those that don't realize, the MVP is a regular season award. I mean, and Lamar Jackson had a fantastic season. 3,678 passing yards, 24 touchdowns, 7 picks on the season. And that's just, his passing. We look at how he did rushing, and, he was among, obviously, yet again, he finished with, if I can read it clearly enough, that's what happens. This is why I have glasses. He had 821 yards on the ground, 5 touchdowns, only lost 2 fumbles out of 5, and he ran the ball 148 times. He did less. This was definitely a career high in passing yards for Lamar Jackson. Lamar threw for only 2,242 last year. He threw for 3,600 this year. An extremely big jump in production through the air. Having guys like Zay Flowers and Odell Beckham Jr., as well as Nelson Aguilar, really helped out. What is funny, though, is he still gets a lot of hate. To me, Lamar Jackson's one of the best athletic quarterbacks I've seen since Michael Vick. I will say probably one of the best since Michael Vick. He is a fantastic athlete, but the problem is the Ravens just don't get the job done when they need to the most. He is if I remember correctly, he's either 2-4 or he's 2-4 in the postseason in his career. He's been in the league since 2018, and all the chips have been put into this franchise. At some point, you got to ask yourself, will Lamar ever make it to the Super Bowl?
Lamar Jackson is 27 years old. I still say he has a good 10 years in him, but if he ever asks himself, is he ever going to go to the Super Bowl? I bring to the question of this, not really question, but a statement, not with this current team. I don't think they've made it to a certain point where they just can't continue. Let's see the good words for it. They just can't go past that point because they've put all of their chips in the center already. I think what Lamar Jackson needs is a team that just has a little bit more chips to push in the center, and I just think he needs to make that change if he has that desire to go to the Super Bowl.
Yeah, and you look at the situation that the Ravens are dealing with, and a lot of people don't understand this. Excuse me. Right now, so this was breaking news out of earlier today, I should say. I mean, it's not anything new, but it's from earlier today. The Seattle Seahawks hired Ravens defensive coordinator Mike Macdonald as their new head coach. It was inevitable. I mean, Macdonald's a brilliant coordinator and led one of the top defenses in the league. But it's yet another frustrating blow for Baltimore because now, when you're a good team like the Ravens, what happens is teams start to poach you for talent more often. The better your team is, the more likely coaches from your team will be getting looks in the offseason if the opportunity arises. On top of that, you take a look at the fact that the Baltimore Ravens have 28 players of note heading into free agency. This is the first year of the Lamar Jackson post-rookie quarterback era as far as navigating through it. the Ravens could have found a way to keep him, I'm sure, but because of that, this is a big loss for Baltimore, and the AFC is no slouch of a conference. We've seen that before. Hell, the Ravens played in the only division in football since 1937, I believe, to not have any team finish with a losing record. Baltimore went 13-4, Cleveland went 11-6, Pittsburgh 10-7, and Cincinnati 5-8 or 9-8. I'm sorry. So you look at where they're at. I mean, they're an extremely talented team, but this is where the business side is going to be put to their biggest test.
This was Mike Macdonald's second time leaving the Ravens. The first time he left to go to Michigan. Now this is his second time. When Mike Macdonald, you can't take away what he can do for any team he's ever served on either behind the scenes, on the bench, anywhere. And I agree with you. It's a big hit for Baltimore, but it's also a major success for the Seahawks because they've been missing a major piece because they failed multiple years. And I believe this could be a success for them with Mike Macdonald. But of course, it just depends on what happens on the field and if he can use what he was able to do for the Ravens for the Seahawks.
Very much so. Going back to the AFC Championship game between Baltimore and Kansas City, Lamar Jackson looked absolute lost out there. I think what separates teams like the Ravens and the 49ers, who we'll be talking about shortly, is the fact that when the Ravens are down, they're not down often, but when they are, they abandon the run, which they shouldn't do. If you're Baltimore and you average 18 or more carries a game, that's where they thrive. That's the reason why they were the best team in football in the regular season. They had, I believe, 8 carries in the AFC Championship. The Chiefs' defense, which is what I consider their saving grace all season, forced Lamar Jackson to throw the ball. And it was turnover city. And not all of it's on Lamar. I will admit, he threw a bad pass in triple coverage in the end zone. But to me, the turning point of the whole game, and you can tell me what you thought it was. But Jared, I think the turning point in the AFC Championship was Zay Flowers catching a 54-yard pass and proceeding to get 15 yards taken off of it because he taunted, which was questionable in of itself. I mean, I understand why they threw the flag, but that whole sequence led to a lot of issues for the Ravens, slowed down a lot of momentum because now instead of getting first and goal at, let's just say, inside the 5, you got first and 15. You're barely in the red zone still. And they couldn't cash in on it, at least as far as the touchdown goes. Zay Flowers later on, he got hit to start off the fourth quarter. He got hit right as he's about to go into the end zone, and he fumbles. And L'Jarius Sneed knocks it out. Chiefs recover. There was just no bouncing back. The Chiefs basically forced 4 turnovers. And I look at where Kansas City's at, and I think it's the way the Chiefs played on Sunday that proved why they are so dangerous, even when they have what's considered a down year by their standards.
And no, I agree with you 100%. And I just believe the Ravens just struggled a lot with Zay Flowers at the end of the day. The Chiefs, they took every chance they could get because if you look at the game from the beginning of it, it was even before the game even started, it was more in favor of the Ravens of winning the game. But as soon as the game started, it kind of just started going downhill for the Ravens because the Chiefs, like I said in the beginning, they take every chance they get. You should never look past at what not a single player on the Chiefs do because they're going to run past you before you can blink. As soon as you blink, they'll be at the touchdown. So I think it's just, I would also even say a lot of misunderstanding between each player on the Ravens as well. I believe that played a factor into it.
You can tell there was a lot of communication issues, and on top of that, just a lot of high tense emotions. You could see it really starting to. I think a prime example was I can't remember off the top of my head if it was Roquan Smith or Patrick Queen, but getting an offsides is one thing. To do it intentionally, and I get that it was a sound strategy, but when you go offsides and then shove the lineman down, yeah, there's no need for that. That tacked on another 15, and that caused. I mean, it was already a desperate move, but it didn't make anything any better. And like I said, this is a lot of the credit to the Chiefs defense because the Chiefs are the first team to win a conference title game despite being held scoreless in the second half since the Steelers in 2010. And the Steelers went on to lose to Green Bay, but that's neither here nor there. Anything can happen this time around. But overall, to me, the Kansas City Chiefs play their best football when they need to be at their best. And that's exactly what they did on Sunday. Buffalo was favored over Kansas City. Baltimore was favored over Kansas City. Kansas City went into both those places, and I don't even consider them much upsets because of just how talented Kansas City is. But this was also the first game all season long in which a receiver on the Chiefs didn't drop a pass. I mean, they dropped 37 passes all season long, and here they are, which was most in the league. Well, finally, the Chiefs play their best when they need to play their best. And that is why they are going on to face the winner of the NFC Championship game that we're about to talk about. And I'm going to be honest with you, Jared. How is it not the Detroit Lions? After being up 24-7 at halftime, how did the Detroit Lions, as a Lions fan, you say you're on the phone with somebody, hey, we're up 24-7. How do you call that person later and say, Lions lost? Detroit lost 34-31. And one of the most improbable comebacks in playoff history. One of the most important comebacks in playoff history. The Niners are the number one seed in the NFC. Detroit's the underdog story everybody loves. But the thing of it is, Dan Campbell all season long was known for his aggressiveness. And at the end of the day, to me, it was his aggressiveness that cost him a chance to go to the Super Bowl.
And I agree with you to an extent. I'd also say because they got too cocky in the game as well. I believed a lot of the management, they believed they had the game in their hands until halftime. Then just something snapped with the 49ers, and they basically said, hey, you want to get aggressive, you want to get cocky? Well, we're not going to let you do that any longer, basically. And we saw what happened. And they basically took the whole game and took it home, and they called their shot. But I think the Lions, just the cockiness and the aggression mixed together was part of their downfall in that game.
I think a big part, take a look on, well, here's something. The Lions game was the most watched NFC title game on any network since 2012. I mean, 56.9 million people tuned in to watch this. And, you know, that when they were up 24-7 at halftime, the win probability was at its highest, at a 91.5%. They allowed 5 straight scores on the defense. Then, deep in Detroit territory, Jahmyr Gibbs had a crucial fumble on 3rd and 4th down. Josh Reynolds dropping passes. 2 4th down attempts failed overall. And what people don't realize, when you don't convert a 4th down, like if you go for it on a 4th down and you don't convert, that's a turnover. It may not say turnover on the column, but that is essentially a turnover. You've essentially given a turnover to the other team. And you know, at its peak, television ratings were at 59 million for the game. I also think, one of the big moments that hurt Dan Campbell and the Lions was when he chose to run the ball on a late 3rd and goal from the 1-yard line. Now it failed. Now a lot of people think, well, wait a minute, it's at the 1, you can run it. But what happened is it failed and it forced the Lions to burn a timeout. So once they did score the touchdown and the onside failed, they couldn't stop the clock. San Francisco, I mean, say what you want, but they came through when they needed to. I'm not trying to take away, it's just as much a San Francisco win as it is a Detroit loss. Because Detroit could have crumbled all the way, but you still got to capitalize on the mistakes. And San Francisco did just that. Christian McCaffrey showed why he's the best running back in the league. Brock Purdy shows why, look, you can call him a game manager all you want, but shit, I'll take it. I would take having that game manager. Because guess what? He just helped lead your team to a Super Bowl. And he's Mr. Irrelevant, the very last pick in the draft. And he just led you to the Super Bowl. Now, don't get me wrong. A lot of great players are on that Niners team. Deebo Samuel, George Kittle, Brandon Ayuk, Juwan Jennings, McCaffrey, Kyle Juszczyk, Chase Young, Nick Bosa, Fred Warner, Dre Greenlaw, Javarius Ward. I mean, the list goes on and on. But at the end of the day, the teams live and die by the quarterback. And Brock Purdy, I mean, Sam Darnold ain't leading that team to the Super Bowl.
Mm-mm.
And although I will say I find it funny, Sam Darnold, there were 13 quarterbacks selected in the 2018 draft, and Sam Darnold's the only one that's been to a Super Bowl. Now, that's a class that has Lamar Jackson, Baker Mayfield, Josh Rosen, Josh Allen, Mason Rudolph, all these other guys. And somehow Sam Darnold's the one this Super Bowl, but he's the backup. So it's just one of those little fun tidbits. But I mean, Jared, what are your thoughts on how Brock Purdy's done?
Brock Purdy, I will say, is probably 100% one of the most underrated players in the NFL, probably in the past 5 years. And I know that's pushing it, but I will, you cannot take credit away from what he's able to do on that field, especially when it comes to a lot of these major games, a lot of these games that have high stakes, carrying it with him, because he puts that on his back and he carries it. And at the end of the day, he carries that to a victory. And a lot of people overlook that. So, Brock Purdy, you got to give him a lot more credit. So, yeah.
Well, and absolutely. I think that, and we live in the age of analytics. So, of course, everyone was like, oh, well, was it the right thing to do for them to go for it on these 4th downs? And, it, a lot of people, okay, this is the thing. Brandon Ayuk's 51-yard gain on a pass that should have been picked. Killer. To me, that's what ended that game. For those that don't exactly remember, so basically Brock Purdy's just throwing up a pass. Now, this one, I'm telling you right now, is way over the head of Ayuk. And somehow, and for those that are tuning into the actual audio visual broadcast of this, I wanted to put this up because I really want people to take a look at this and tell me, like, when you see this, you would think that would be an interception. Well, somehow that ball gets tipped out of Vildor's hands, and Ayuk catches it, and it's a 50, I believe I said 54-yard gain. No, 51-yard gain. I'm sorry. Puts them at first and goal inside the 5. San Francisco eventually scores a touchdown, and I mean, I don't know. It's unbelievable that it's one play, but Detroit let a 17-point lead slip away. Like, first possession of the second half, a turnover on downs. There was, like I said, the catch from Ayuk. Should have been a pick. You get a pick right there, huge. Right after that touchdown on that drive, Jahmyr Gibbs fumbles. Then on the crucial third down, Josh Reynolds drops the ball. Then another touchdown is dropped and another turnover on downs. Detroit just kept shooting themselves in the foot. And the 49ers, who are brilliantly coached, who have a very underrated team, took full advantage. And now they get their, even though Jimmy Garoppolo was the quarterback at the time when they first met, they get their rematch against the Kansas City Chiefs in Super Bowl 58. And, the jury's out on this one. And obviously we're not going to be, next week we'll go more in depth on previewing the Super Bowl. But I'm taking a look at where we stand right now. We had two fantastic championship games. The AFC and NFC championship games were fun to watch. I know you're going to have fans that are going to bitch about the refs, bitch about Taylor Swift being on TV, bitch about it, Eminem flipping off and 49ers fans thinking that this game is rigged. And believe me, I've seen enough Cleveland Browns games in my life to say that if any team gets screwed over by rigged officials, they would probably be the ones. But at the end of the day, I mean, you look at where we're at right now, there's a lot to be. This was a great championship. And on top of that, added in the two games, Jared, over 100 million people tuned in to watch the championship games this past weekend.
I will go out on a limb and say this. I believe this Super Bowl this year is going to have record-breaking viewership numbers just by looking at how many people watch the championships games this year compared to last year. I believe these numbers are going to be record-breaking for any sport within the NFL, NHL, MLB history. You're looking at the 49ers and the Chiefs, a rematch from 2020. And it's like both teams have quite frankly improved by at least 50 to 65% since 2020. You have new faces on the team. You have new movement and new strategies within those teams and within the management. So it's going to be record-breaking numbers on Super Bowl day, not just for the halftime, but people actually watching the game, because this could be the most interesting game. And usually I'm just excited for the food, but I think I'm going to be excited for the game this year.
Oh, I'm definitely excited for how the game potentially is going to turn out. Like I said, the 49ers have, they're one of the most storied franchises in sports, but they have not won a Super Bowl in over 25 years. So if you want to get technical, they're overdue for one. I mean, but come on. The Chiefs, and I've talked about this before, I do find it funny that the Chiefs are starting to become the villains of the NFL, and I think it's not necessarily their fault. I think it's just what happens. It's a natural reaction of human society when one team does so good for so long. I mean, the Patriots. Honestly, if you want to be technical, I mean, yeah, you know, they were despised because they were so good. The Chiefs are becoming so despised because for the past 6 years, the trip to the Super Bowl in the AFC title game involved Patrick Mahomes. And the only time he didn't get there, or the only 2 times he didn't get there, was one against Brady and then once against Joe Burrow. And you're just you're a bad throw and a bad offsides call away from being in those Super Bowls as well. There is a very good chance that Patrick Mahomes could have been in 6 Super Bowls already. Improbable, improbable to think about, but it's true. Patrick Mahomes could have easily been in 6 Super Bowls in his first 6 years as starters. And look, even if Patrick Mahomes gets blown out in the Super Bowl, I personally think the Chiefs will win. But if Patrick Mahomes, even if he loses in the Super Bowl, this guy is going to be a Hall of Famer if he retired the next day. Hell, he could retire before the Super Bowl, and he would still be a Hall of Famer. That's how good his career has been so far. He has a 14-3 record in the playoffs. He's already tied Peyton Manning for the most playoff wins in history. I don't know how much more you can say about the guy.
I'm pretty sure everyone that watches know my dislike of Patrick Mahomes and just the Chiefs franchise, but I'm going to say this. Patrick Mahomes is definitely a future Hall of Famer. His stats are almost just as perfect as a diamond from Jared's. So, hey, you get that, Jared's? So his records are almost perfect, and he will definitely be a Hall of Famer. But I just think he has a lot more records to break that he wants to, and can he do it? Absolutely, he could. It's just a matter of time. Either way, if he wins or loses this Super Bowl or next Super Bowl, he can still break those records if he wanted to or not.
I mean, very much so. Well, folks, before we move on, I want to say thank you so much for Jared for being on with us this evening. And you are folks tuning into Roundabout Sports presented by Interstate 70 Sports Media. I'm the Maestro Jeremy Karp alongside Jared Shannon. You can find us on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and be sure to find the Roundabout Sports show out on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and Google Podcasts, and so many more places. Okay, so I know, Jared, that on tomorrow night's episode of Issues with Wrestling, you and Christopher Miles are going to be talking a lot about Vince McMahon and the legacy that is now definitely far past screwed. But I'm gonna tell it like it is. I wanted to say my piece on this, and I want your thoughts on this. It's hard for me as a guy that grew up watching wrestling, um, to imagine professional wrestling without Vince McMahon. I think it's impossible, personally. Um, Vince McMahon is the most influential promoter in professional wrestling history. He created this empire, and wrestling would not have the global reach it does without him. You can have all of that and still have this guy be a mega creep that apparently has allegedly pooped on women. Which, yes, that is one of the allegations. I read the allegations. I read the majority of the 67-page report that was filed by Miss Grant against Mr. McMahon. She was a former employee at the global headquarters between 2009 and 2022, or 2019 and 2022. But she alleged McMahon coerced her into a sexual relationship, and along with executive John Laurinaitis and another wrestler who they list as a former UFC fighter. Huh. Well, we'll think about that one. Sexually trafficked her and repeatedly sexually assaulted her. She was subjected to extreme cruelty and degradation, including being defecated upon during a sexual encounter, including using sexual toys that he had apparently named after wrestlers. Okay, this is just some of what's included in that report. And I still, okay. It's not funny. Let's first address the elephant in the room. It's not funny. But if Vince McMahon named one of those sex toys after the wrestler Big Dick Johnson, I mean, come on. Okay, but in all seriousness, this has led to Vince McMahon stepping down from TKO, anything WWE affiliated. It's marked the first time in history no member of the McMahon family is involved with the company. And yes, Paul Levesque is, Triple H. He is married into the family, but I mean a blood member of the McMahon family. No one is involved. I will admit, I had to take my glasses off, put them back on, wipe the lens, whatever, when I read those allegations. And so I have to ask you, Jared, what did you make of that when you first read those allegations against Vince McMahon?
If anyone knows me, I have the utmost respect and love for Vince McMahon. I believe he is possibly, not even possibly, the best authority figure in any company worldwide. But when I read those allegations, you have to take those with a grain of salt as in a fan aspect, because those are just allegations that were just written from one point of view. And I can't really say anything bad about Vince McMahon, just for the fact that it's from a fan aspect. You can believe something that's on paper compared to how you're viewing it just from one side of the story. But yeah, reading it did disgust me, but does it change my perspective of Vince McMahon at this current point? No. Until he's proven guilty or whatever happens after that.
I think the biggest thing that a lot of people, like I said, he stepped down from all of his roles. He has no active role. He is a majority stockholder still, or shareholder, however you want to word it. But what people don't realize is that Vince McMahon I almost worry um, that he's gonna get the Chris Benoit treatment, if you will. That what's gonna happen is, yeah, I mean, if you go on the WWE website, he's officially off it. He's not on there, and it's the company he created. And I mean, think of all the matches that he was in. Think of all the promos he took part in. Look, we're not just going to act like Vince McMahon was the head of the company. He was the guy that was on screen for arguably the greatest rivalry in wrestling history. Vince McMahon, Mr. McMahon and Stone Cold Steve Austin. He was there feuding with some of the top wrestlers. I mean, he was at the forefront of the Attitude Era, the Ruthless Aggression Era. I mean, this guy was up front. And I will say, watching old interviews on shows like Donahue and Larry King Live, I've been catching some of those lately, where Vince McMahon was confronted about sex abuse scandals, steroid scandals. I mean, these were in the 90s. It does bring up a lot of questions of the legitimacy of these allegations. Because if this ain't the first time Vince has been accused of misconduct. Might be the first time he's been accused of pooping on women in a gang rape, but it is not the first time that Vince McMahon has been accused of sexually misconduct of some degree to women. And a lot of women have come forward and said that he's been harassed, he's been abusive, towards women. I mean, his marriage, he's been separated from Linda McMahon for years now, even though they're not officially divorced. It raises a lot of questions, and there's a lot of mysteries this brings up. I think this also, from the business standpoint, comes at the worst possible time because it's WrestleMania season. And on top of the talent injuries that they're already dealing with, I mean, now you got people asking about this to all the wrestlers on the roster, as well as Triple H and other executives. So what do you think on this?
I was just looking at the WWE app because you can look at the superstars stuff like that. I was searching up Vince McMahon's name, and I think he could be getting that Chris Benoit treatment because even in the alumni section, the only Vince McMahon that shows up is Vincent J. McMahon, the original Vince McMahon. And it's kind of concerning because how can you blacklist someone that created an empire? And that's kind of scary as well because without him, there would be no NXT, WWE, these other major promotions out there. It wouldn't be possible because I think even those promoters, they fell in love with wrestling because of Vincent K. McMahon. But yeah, it's difficult for me because I'm Gen Z. A lot of Gen Z, they will jump to conclusions, but as a person that have always loved Vince McMahon, it's just difficult for me to kind of believe anything terrible that is said. But of course, there are some terrible things I do believe is true about him, but it's just kind of difficult.
Yeah, and once again, folks, this is something that Jared and Christopher Miles will go more in depth about and delve into deeper tomorrow night on Issues with Wrestling. They're going to talk about the complicated legacy of Vince McMahon and the many failures that have been presented to him. And tell us a little bit more about tomorrow night's episode.
Tomorrow night episode, it will be me and Christopher Miles, a lovely St. Louis referee, and all across Southern Illinois, St. Louis. We're going to talk about the failures of Vince McMahon, from bookings to lawsuits, from all the 9 yards of Vince McMahon, from possibly even some struggles he had from buying the company from his fathers, to certain partnerships that fell through, certain people that was backstage. Maybe we'll even talk about the downfall of his relationship with his son, Shane McMahon, because that was a major failure. If you weren't at the Royal Rumble in 2022 in St. Louis, then you missed a good one. But that'll be tomorrow night at 7 p.m. It's going to be a good episode if you love wrestling, if you love business as well, because Vince McMahon was also a businessman. If you love just watching people fail and people talk about people failing, that's the place to be on Facebook. 7 p.m. tomorrow on Issues with Wrestling, presented by Interstate 70 Sports.
All righty. Well, we got one more piece of news before we call it an evening in this week's edition. You know, I take a look at this, and this is hitting to the St. Louis side here with St. Louis Cardinals. Okay. The starting rotation, the Cardinals have made a lot of moves, and it goes without saying, and I just wanted to briefly touch base on this. Look, they signed Sonny Gray, who finished in second in the AL Cy Young race in 2023. Biggest move of the offseason. Now, they only have two returning starters right now, Miles Michaelis and Steven Matz. Okay, well, Sonny Gray is 34 years old. Kyle Gibson and Lance Lynn are both 36. Lynn will be turning 37 in May. Michaelis is 35, and Steven Matz is 33. As good as the Cardinals have at least put in the effort of trying to boost their rotation, you got a huge problem with the long term of it. And I mean, let's also not forget, last year, Lynn posted an ERA of 5.73, and Kyle Gibson posted an ERA of 4.73. Michaelis also struggled. And, you know, injuries ran rampant. And to me, in sports, the best ability is availability. And if these guys can't be relied on to pitch well, be available to pitch, let alone to pitch well, I mean, what's the difference of who you sign? We know Jordan Montgomery's not coming back to St. Louis, at least not as long as Ollie's manager. We know that Blake Snell's probably going to go to the Yankees or something, because that's just how it goes these days. Now, they're going to enter the season with an aging rotation, with injury histories and quality innings, all with question marks, which creates a lot of red flags. And, you know, Fangraphs predicts the Cardinals to be the only team in the division with a winning record. I would love for that to be the case, because I'd love a division title. But right now, you know, there's nothing about this team right now when it comes to pitching that wows me, or in the sense of like extreme excitement. Like, yay, they got Sonny Gray. I'm happy. I'm happy they got Lance Lynn, Kyle Gibson, but I'm not. The hopes aren't super high. It's one of those instances where I wouldn't mind being proven wrong. But you got to give me some substance here. You got to give me results. You know, Jared?
You know, I've been reading a lot of a lot of press conferences about Ollie, and the one thing that I have seen him doing better on is taking accountability and actually admitting that he has to do better. And I believe with a lot of these moves that he's doing, I have more confidence in the Cardinals this coming season than I did last season. And I believe I'm not going to say they're going to go to any championships games, but I believe that they are going to prove a lot of teams wrong and prove a lot of the Cardinals fans that they're not out of it. They still got what we used to have back in 2011 or back before they fired Mike. I
All
believe
right, well,
this is their time to prove it.
it's now or never, honestly. Ollie's on the hot seat, whether the team wants to admit it or not.
Oh yeah, there's a lot of moves, and I believe he knows he's on that hot seat because I I guarantee you the owners were embarrassed about the record last year. Because if I was the owners, I'd be a little bit more embarrassed, and I probably wouldn't have given him another opportunity because if I'm correct, that was the worst record the Cardinals has had in over about 20 years, if I'm correct.
The worst record since 1990, and keep in mind which basically means, Jared, it is the worst record we've ever seen in our lifetime. It is the worst. They never lost 90 games in our life. The last time they lost 90 games in a season, Whitey Herzog was in his last season as manager, and he didn't finish the season. So it goes without saying where we're kind of at with this whole thing, but
I
2 weeks
believe,
what happens.
yeah, they're going to prove that. Well, in my heart, I believe they're going to prove that they still got it, and they're going to prove to a lot of the teams that you can't rule them out just yet.
Okay. Well, Jared, thank you so much for joining us. And folks, thank you so much for tuning in this evening. We're going to wrap things up here on Roundabout Sports. First, I want to say be sure to tune in tomorrow night on the Interstate 70 Sports Media Facebook page, as well as the Issues with Wrestling Facebook page for the newest episode of Issues with Wrestling with Christopher Miles. And Jared, what time does that start? Or at least Central Time.
7 o'clock Central Standard Time.
All righty, 7 o'clock CST. And folks, as always, we put on the show the NAMI helpline. That is 1-800-950-NAMI. That is 1-800-950-NAMI. NAMI is the National Alliance on Mental Illness, the nation's largest grassroots mental health organization dedicated to building better lives for those who struggle with mental health issues. And of course, we put the Suicide and Crisis Lifeline on as well. And for that, you dial 988. Understand that the line is open 24/7, 365, 366 this year because it's a leap year. And understand that you are never alone out there in this world, folks. We all are struggling in some way, shape, or form, even if we have a hard time admitting it. But that doesn't mean we have to struggle alone. That doesn't mean we have to go down the path of life, going through the struggles and the hurdles and the obstacles without any help. You are always loved, and you're always a phone call or an email or text message away. And you could also be the listening ears and seeing eyes for somebody else in need. Once again, I want to thank Jared and thank all you for tuning in. And we will see you next week. I'm the Maestro, Jeremy Karp. And remember, life is a book full of empty pages just waiting to be written in. Make your lives worth reading.